Hey everybody, so welcome back to another video, and here we're actually going to start a new series. So in this series, I'm going to take you guys along with me as I try to learn the Pygame module inside of Python. For those of you who don't know about this module, this is actually a great way to make some basic video games, which for the most part are kind of restricted to 2D games. I'm not really sure how this video will turn out because it will be a lot of watching other people's YouTube videos and reading some of the Pygame docs. I'm also going to do this series to help me because I think one of the best ways for me to learn is if I actually teach some of these concepts, right? So I got this idea from another popular Python channel, which is Tech with Tim, who is doing a series like this where he's learning C++. Where he learns the C++ and he teaches a little bit to his audience, and he has a series going on like that. But this guy is light years ahead of me in terms of pure programming skills, so I'm going to see how this turns out and see if it's awesome or not. Alright, so if you guys want to follow along with me in this tutorial, I'm going to already assume that you have Python installed on your computer. However, you are still going to have to install this Pygame module onto your computer as it is not native to the Python language. But all you're going to need to do is open up your terminal or your command prompt, depending on if you're Windows or if you're a Mac. And all you have to do is go into here and you can type pip install Pygame. And as you see, for me, I already have the requirements satisfied because Pygame is already on my computer. But I actually had a lot of trouble installing Pygame, and I think that this issue is somewhat common. So if just pip install doesn't work for you, you can try doing pip install -- user Pygame and see if that works for you. And then if that doesn't work, you're going to want to make sure that your pip is at the latest version. So what you can do is do pip -V, I believe, and this version for me works. But if that's not, then if you have some sort of earlier version, try updating your pip and then try installing Pygame again. But after you get all of that, all you're gonna have to do is import Python or Pygame into whatever IDE that you're using. So that's as easy as imports Pygame. And if you installed it correctly, you should be able to import this with no errors. Alright, so after you import Pygame into your IDE, the first thing you're going to want to do is create that first window or display, right? So we kind of did this in that turtle tutorial if you watched that in my last video, but all you gotta do in Pygame is it's really easy. Is you can set your display, or you can call it window depending on what you want to call it. You can call it anything, and you just gotta set it equal to, you tap into the Pygame library, and then you can tap into display, and then in display you can set into another submodule, and you can say set mode, right? And then this takes one argument, and it's actually a tuple, and it's going to be the size of your window. So you can do anything, I think 640 by 480, 500, something like that. It's probably a safe bet for the size of your window, but this can be different for whatever sort of game you're trying to go for here, right? And I think probably for my first game, I'm going to do some sort of like I watched one of the Tech with Tim intro tutorials, just watching it and not following along with the code, and he made like a 1v1 space shooter kind of game, and I think maybe I'll take a twist on that and I'll make it kind of like Space Invaders or something like that. I don't really know, but I'm going to try to get the basic syntax down and then try to work my way up to making more complex programs. But first we got to set the display, set it equal to that tuple. Now after we set this display, what we're going to need to do is create the main game loop that we're going to loop over and over again while we're running the game, right? So you can set the easiest way, and one of the simplest ways to do this is you can just set some sort of variable. So let's just say that running, and we can set that equal to true. Whoops. And then we can say while running, And then now we have this main game loop right here, right? But what we're gonna do is you're gonna in this side of this loop, and no matter what your Pygame file is, or whatever game you're making, you're gonna want to iterate through all of the Pygame events, right? And these can be any sort of mouse clicks, collisions, anything like that, right? So what you can do is say for every event, and actually get all the events. You can say for every event in, tap into the Pygame module, and then we can tap into the events, and these events has a function get, right? And then we can go and say if events dot type equals quit, Pygame dot quit, and just quit in all capitals, just an inbuilt variable in Pygame, and then all you got to do is say Pygame dot quit. Okay, so now we should have a basic window, and we got this basic black window right here, but a little boring, right? Let's see what else we can get. Another important concept for any sort of video games that you're designing is the frames per second, right? And right now we have not defined any default frames per second variable. So what happens is every single time this game loop is running, our computer is trying to run it at the max frame rate possible. And that sounds great in theory, but what happens is your computer actually fluctuates on how well it can perform, right? So when you have any sort of physics or something like that built into your game, that fluctuating FPS value is going to make all the physics wonky, or any sort of feature that you're adding, right? So what you want to do is you can set some sort of default frames per second value, and you can tick that much time off the clock every single time you run the game loop, so that no matter what is going on, everything's going to run smoothly, right? So your computer is going to try to run at that frame rate unless your computer isn't able to, right? So I think an easy one is just you can set FPS, since it's a constant, so put it in all caps, and we can set it equal to 60. So there's another object in the Pygame library called the clock, right? So what we can do is we can create a new variable clock, and we can set it equal to pygame.time.clock in the capital C, because it is an object. And then what we can do is go at the top of this loop, we can say clock.tick, and then we can pass in that FPS value. So now every single time that we run this, ooh, I have no idea what that is. What the heck? What is going on in there? Okay, well, this error isn't happening anymore. I don't know why. But I guess that was just a random thing that happened when we ran it last time. But it seems to be working well now. And while you can't see that FPS in the background, it is working. So the way the window actually works for Pygame is every single loop that it goes through, right? It draws every single object onto the screen, right? So while it looks like your little player is moving across the screen, it's actually just being drawn over and over and over and over again, right? And if you guys have any familiarity with like Photoshop or any sort of Illustrator, any of the Adobe products, you know that there's all those layers on the side, right? And you can put layers over top of each other to cover stuff up, and that's the same way that Pygame works, right? Each sequential line on here is another layer, right? So if we draw some sort of thing on this line, and then we draw another thing on this line, if they overlap, this line will be over top of this one, right? And that's a really important concept that we get as we get into level design and actually placing the players, the enemies, anything like that onto the screen, right? So now let's just say that we're making a that's kind of like Space Invaders game. We're gonna need to make some sort of playership, right? So let's make a new file, Python file, and we can call it ship.py or something like that. Let's just call it ship.py right now. And okay, so if we're trying to make some sort of player ship, we're gonna first need to import Pygame into here in order to actually create any sort of the functionality of the ship. And it'll be easier if we just create some sort of ship class. So let's create a ship. And then let's initialize it. But okay, so we can actually inherit from Pygame, which I think this will make it a lot easier. So we can inherit from the sprite class, and sprites are kind of just like different sort of game objects that you can put onto the screen. So let's inherit the actual, is it sprite? Is it capital sprite? Okay, yeah. So now what we can do is we call super, right, there we go. And then we can actually start creating the images, right? So in Pygame, there's a really important order that you're going to actually want to put images onto the screen. So the first thing you're going to want to do is tap into the image, right? You're going to want to load the image onto the screen. So we're going to say pygame.image.load, but we don't have any files yet. So I'm going to go and look up. So I'm going to try to pull some sort of PNG off the internet. Okay, so I've dragged the player PNG onto into the folder. So it's on the same level as my ship.py, so I can just call player.png right there. But what I'm going to want to do here, because this is a sprite, is I'm going to want to convert it. I believe the docs say convert alpha, but I'm not completely sure the difference between convert alpha and convert. Anyways, I'll look that up when I go back to edit this. So another thing that I'm going to want to do is to create a rectangle around it so that we can do collisions and stuff like that later. So let's just call self.rect, and then we can equal it to self.image.rect. That's what it is called. Get rect. And then we're going to want to give it some sort of velocity in the x and y direction so that we can move it later. So we can say self.x. Let's just put it at 0 for now. And then we'll just give it some sort of speed. And then let's just put it at 5 right now. We can fiddle with that a little bit later. So after we initialize it, right, we can make a new function. Let's just call it update. And then we'll take in self. And what we're going to do is we can do this to update the player's position. Okay? So what we can do is we can say self.rect. And because this is a rectangle, we can say self.rect.x. And then we can set it. We can add the velocity. So actually, this is what we're going to want to do. We got to put velocity x and then velocity y, and then we can add it to self plus that, and then we can say self.rect.y plus equals self.vel.y. So now if we go back into our main.py, we can say from ship import ship, and then we can come down here, and then we can set player equal to ship. And one of the cool things about Pygame is you can group all yours, because by the time you finish one of these big games, you're going to have a bunch of sprites that you're going to have drawn on the screen. But what you can do is you can create a group of all those sprites so that when you are referencing them in your actual game loop, you can do that in like 1 or 2 lines, whereas before it would have probably taken like dozens and dozens and dozens of lines. So what you can do is let's just go underneath this player, and then we can create this sprite group variable, and we can set it equal to pygame.sprite.group to class.group. Okay, and then after we do that, we can add that player to that group. So sprite.add player. So now that we have our player added to the sprite group, what we can do is come down here, and when we are actually updating all of the objects within the game loop, we can actually run that update function that we made over here, right? So now we actually have updated all of the objects on the screen. So I think it'll be easy if we just come over here and we leave a comment, and we can say here we're gonna update objects, and then don't get updating and rendering confused, because then now here we're actually gonna have to render objects onto screen. And then what we can do is just say sprite group dot draw. So we're going to want to draw, and then this takes one argument, and all it is asking for is where do you want to draw, and we're going to want to draw it onto the display. So now that we've drawn all these things to display, there's only one more thing we can do. We have to go here, and at the bottom of the while running loop, we can just update the entire display. So pygame.display.update, and then when we run it, we see we actually got our spaceship onto the screen, but as you can see, it's very big. Yeah, so we're gonna have to do a little bit of work for that, but I think we can leave that for the next episode, where we actually resize and transform this entire image. But I'm not really sure how this video is going to turn out. I've been recording for 40 minutes, so I'm going to see how long this video turns out to be, and I'm going to try to cut off all the parts where I'm just trying to figure out what to do next. But if you guys enjoyed this type of video, let me know, and I'll be sure to try to get more content out for you guys. I'm actually really interested in learning this this module. Maybe we can even do some like game dev type of videos in the future. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Thanks, guys.